the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, and we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome back to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. Guys, I know it's been a while, but we're, as the chipmunks say, back in style. Obviously, as some of you may know, I am in prep for a play at the moment. So, what play, you ask? Oh, okay. Sorry, it's Blue Remembered Hills, which is playing at the Maskers Theatre here in Southampton. Please Google now for tickets. But that aside, we didn't want to give you too long without a Dr. Squee Show. Obviously, with the interviews, it takes a little bit of organizing times and then recording and then kind of whatever else. So instead, what we've done, seeing as it's the month of All Hallows Eve, we decided to do a look back on Twin Peaks, starting with season 1. So this is Dr. Squee Show presents the Twin Peaks Files season 1, which is easy for me to say. Now, I'm not going to be taking on this mighty caper alone. And by the way, what we're going to do is we're going to do season 1 in one episode, and then 2 episodes to cover season 2, and then we'll do the movie returns as we go forth. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to welcome my co-host for the look back on Twin Peaks. Obviously, I'm just stepping into town as Special Agent Squee, so I need someone on the ground, local to the town. Please welcome back to the Dr. Squee Show, Deputy Jim.
Hello.
How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm good. I'm good.
I love that. I almost give myself like kind of like get myself out of breath doing that intro. They go, yeah, hi. You're like the cool chilled one. I'm like the, hey, come on, let's go. So yeah, season 1 of Twin Peaks, man. Let's obviously Jim is my one of my co-hosts from the Retrek podcast. Please do check that out online. Jim, let's take it back though. What are your rememberings of Twin Peaks when it was first on? Personally, I don't remember that much. I was about the same age as you, but it's sort of like I was aware of it being around, but I never really watched it.
Yeah. When it was first on, I remember I think BBC showed it on Saturday nights, but I'm happy to be fact checked on that. But I remember my dad saying, oh, you know, this is really big. This is the big new American thing, and it's a murder mystery, and you've got to work out who's done it, and all of this stuff. And I vaguely remember the first episode being on in the background. They probably shouldn't have been letting me watch it, because I'll have been, 9, 8?
As it's going to come up a lot during this podcast, it was a very different time.
Yeah.
Fucking anything.
And I just remember my mum going, no, and that was it. That was an end to Twin Peaks in our house. My mum did not enjoy it. And then I came back to it because I became a big fan of the X-Files. And whenever you read about the X-Files, you read about Twin Peaks was an influence. And also, you know, I was getting into cinema anyway, and David Lynch, and so I really wanted to see Twin Peaks, but, you know, this is back in the days before we had streaming services. So I had to wait until eventually they released it on DVD, and they released season 1 and then didn't release season 2 for years and years and years. So I saw season 1 several times. And then when I went to university, my film lecturer had sort of curated a selection of VHS tapes that you could take out of the university library, and he had all of Twin Peaks on VHS. So it wasn't until I was in my first year of uni that I finally got to see season 2 and, you know, actually see how it all panned out. And then eventually I was like, right, I'm done with this not releasing season 2. I've had enough. And I imported the big gold box edition, which until they upgraded it to Blu-ray and put the movie in and the missing pieces, that was like the definitive version you could get at the time. So I've seen Twin Peaks through a few times over the years, and yeah, I am a big fan of it, and we will get into the reasons why, I'm sure, as we go through. What about yourself?
Well, funny thing is, I mean, I remember it more from like I was very aware of it, and there was kind of certain references which I recognized, like the Red Room and the
Mm.
kind of like little person who's in it, and all these kind of like little benchmarks that I knew, and I remember it popping up in all sorts of pop culture. Probably most famously because it is just the benchmark for pop culture references. The Simpsons, they've got an episode where
Oh, yeah.
uh, like the Mr. Like Who Killed Mr. Burns? Lee says like appears in a dream. And yeah, it's so like I didn't really know it that well myself, but during lockdown I actually watched because I think it was it during lockdown or just before when The Return came out? Do you remember?
2017, so yeah, a couple of years before.
So I just remember like whether it's during lockdown or just before, I remember like The Return had just come out and I decided to watch all the way through and watch The Return with
Mhm.
it. But I think it's a mixture because like three things. One, because it was in such a condensed period of time I watched it. Two, time was meaningless during lockdown. And
Oh,
three,
yeah.
I was drunk for 90% of lockdown, I'm quite sure. So I don't actually remember too much of it, but I remember the kind of big beats, but like it's been so great kind of watching it and almost kind of studying it because I knew we were going to be talking about it on here. And man, there is so much to talk
Oh,
about.
there is, yeah.
Say, you got the fact that it was starting off like Kyle MacLachlan had been in the movie with Lynch. Was it
He'd done June.
June? Was it? I knew he'd been
Yeah,
in.
he was the lead in June, and I think this
He do
was
another
kind
film
of.
with it.
He went on to do Blue Velvet, but I think
Right.
maybe was Blue Velvet after Twin Peaks. It would have been very close. I think Blue Velvet maybe came out in 1990.
There's
Um,
an interview I'd really recommend everyone checking out is when he appeared in Films to Be Buried with oh god Brett
Brett Goldstein.
Goldstein. Thank you. Where he goes through kind of favorite films of someone basically, but before he does a little mini interview with them before, and he did a wonderful interview. They talk a lot about The Return, but they also talk a bit about the original series and how Carl got to know Lynch through working on the
Mm.
movie. And yeah, so I know also the fact you told me this, and I don't think when you told me it, I didn't think I'd heard it, but I think I might have heard it before and sort of forgotten that Twin Peaks was based on. It was meant to be a sort of like almost spoof of soap operas, which
Yeah,
I can just imagine the pitch meeting where they're going to like, "Oh, brilliant! Yeah, well, soap has been a really popular sitcom, which is like a kind of takeoff of soap operas and stuff. I think that was kind of in the review just at that stage, but not very long ago. So wow, yeah, the idea of doing this sounds really great. So yeah, so there's going to be log lady. Sorry, what? There's going to be this lady with this log. There's going to be dream sequences where we go into this red room. It's going to be a little person. I'm sure they used. More colorful terms at the time, facing the wall at one stage when he's talking. It's like, sorry, did you smoke all the weed? Did you take all the drugs before coming to this pitch meeting? I mean, so I love the fact this is the same thing as I said about the recent Joker they do on Fuchs or
fully adore.
Foliade. Yeah, that's how I said it. Joker Foliade. It's like in that case, it wasn't necessarily kind of my favorite film, but I just love anything like this, which just never should have got past the studio. I'm just kind of fascinated, and it's just beautiful for it. And this is a great show anyway. It's just endlessly fascinating. There's always something interesting happening. The cinematography is amazing,
Yeah.
and it just draws you in instantly. But I just don't know how they pitched it apart from the sitcom. The
No.
thing seems like that would have sold it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the pilot, barring one or two weirder elements, it's quirky, but it's not totally out there. And I think it had enough elements that were recognizable to fans of, because it's based on the sort of evening soaps like your Dallas and your Dynasty
Yeah.
rather than your Days of Our Lives or whatever. But I think there's enough in the pilot that you could get away with thinking, okay, it's a little bit quirky, it's a little bit dark in places, but it's recognizable as something that could be on a network show. But then once it gets a series order, that's when it starts to really kind of, and then I mean, when we get to talking about the return, I think that's the ultimate example of what happens when you give people just complete creative reign. And we'll obviously talk about it a lot more, but I said at the time when that was on, that will never be allowed to happen on network TV ever again.
I mean,
But it's incredible it did.
I don't want to jump to go into that too much, but yeah, I think like that. Again, Brett Goldstein said it really well. That it's like it didn't give everyone what they expected, but neither did the original Twin Peaks. It did what the original Twin Peaks did of giving giving people something so out there, so weird, so different. But you don't do that by doing the original Twin Peaks again, because
No,
people will
true.
be expecting it at that stage. But anyway, we'll get into the return.
We will.
In a few episodes. But I thought this was just such a strong opening as well. I think also like just talk of the form just quickly a little bit more. I think also the fact that they kind of based it on soap operas does give you quite a lot of latitude to do some weird shit. And then Lynch has just taken that to the extreme. So things like satanic cults and stuff were in the news, so that's seeped into soap operas. I think there's also a lot about kind of small towns in this, like even though Romsey, where I come from, is Night and Day from Twin Peaks, it is a small town, and so I get that kind of like small town mentality which is in there. There's something which I recognized as far removed as I am from the American mountain towns. It's like there is something about small towns which is kind of universal, which is in this as well. But let's get into it. The first episode, which, as you've kind of alluded to there, was meant as a sort of TV movie. And you've told me, I haven't clicked out yet, there wasn't actually a wrap-up ending tacked onto this for international distribution.
I mean, it's interesting. This is going back to how TV used to work. And most of the time, you would produce a pilot episode, and the networks would view multiple pilots, and they would decide which ones they were willing to invest the money into to make into a full season. And that doesn't happen as much now, particularly with streaming. They seem to go, right, we'll pick this up for a season of 8 episodes, and you're getting your 8 episodes. So this was designed as effectively a TV movie. It was designed to be a 2-hour TV event that hopefully would then lead into a series. But their backup plan was, well, if this doesn't get picked up, it's going to be fairly expensive. We need to recoup some money somewhere. So what we'll do is we'll film an extra 15 minutes that wraps up the story, and then we'll palm it off on the Europeans and tell them it's a film. And like they used to do all the time. Like we got them Ewoks movies, which I actually like. I'd still rate them above the prequels, but never mind. But we got them in the cinema, and it's like, oh, there's this new Star Wars movie, except it were on TV in America. It's a TV movie, but they think we're stupid over here, and we'll fall for all this stuff. But yeah, so that was the idea. If Twin Peaks didn't work, they would sell this version, and so they filmed 15 minutes. It's exactly the same right up until the final scene, when you have Laura's mum having a vision. And in the episode as we see
By the
it,
way, before we go any further, spoilers. We're
Spoilers.
going to talk about the whole series. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Come back and watch this later. It'll be available on youtube.com/Dr. Squee.
And so it finishes with her having a vision of someone stealing Laura's necklace. Whereas in the movie version, it finishes with her having a very different vision, which leads into a, very tacked on finale. And the majority of the footage they filmed for this finale was used later, primarily in Cooper's dream in episode 3. So that's where the Red Room came from, and all everything else that's involved in that sequence came from this alternate ending. And by a weird twist of fate, it was all to do with licensing issues and things like that. So for a long, long time, the only version of the pilot that was commercially available was the TV movie version. Because for whatever reason, they weren't allowed to release the pilot as it was. And I think that DVD set I mentioned was the first time you could get the pilot as a pilot. And
Yep.
so there was a generation of people who missed this when it first aired and had to watch that pilot and think that was weird at the end, and then watch the series and go, well, wait a minute, he died in that, and we found out who the killer was, but now you're saying we didn't. And then obviously this was sort of in the very early days of the internet, so I think there were like notice boards and stuff on the internet saying, oh, by the way, if you're watching the pilot, stop it when she starts streaming, because that ending will make no sense.
It's just insane, and I've got to check it out now, because it's like there's no way in 15 minutes to wrap up everything they've laid
No,
down.
there is.
What I was just going to say, what I loved about the pilot is, I kind of compared it to the Cheers pilot. It's really great if you watch it, establishing who the characters are in a very, like, obviously with that they've got like it wasn't quite as short for American sitcom half hours. I think it was like 25 minutes now. It's like 20, 21, 20,
if
you know,
you're
something like
lucky.
that. Exactly. Then it was getting close to the half-hour mark, and but even in that time, to establish who the characters are, to give them kind of one little scene each where it kind of told you who they are, was great. And in this episode, like, it's a feature length, but in the pilot they really explore all the characters. Coop actually comes in quite late in the pilot, which in your memories he's in it for so much more, but again they make good use of the time he is in it to really establish him.
It's just so well structured. It's that pilot. Like, I won't do this for every episode because we'll be here all night. But like, if you break down the pilot a little bit, like the first act of it, so an act in television. Again, I feel like I'm having to explain how TV used to work a lot for people who've only had streaming. But yeah, there used to be adverts every 15 minutes or so, and so television was written to fit to that format. So a 1 hour show would have a teaser, 4 acts, and a sort of an epilogue. And by extension, a 2 hour show, as this is, has 8 acts.
Yeah.
But the first act of it is just so exquisitely structured. So it starts with the discovery of Laura Palmer's body, and then you get this chain of the information passing throughout the town and disseminating. And so you see they make a call to the police station. So we have the people who find the body. They make a call to the police station. We get to know the people in the police station. They then reach out to the mother, so we get to meet the mother briefly. The mother reaches out to Laura's friends, so we get to meet some of Laura's friends. And also Laura's boyfriend, or one of her boyfriends, as it will turn out. And so we get introduced to him. And then eventually, through the phone calls and the word of mouth and blah, 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 this spreads and spreads and spreads until we get to the father, who is told about it. And then that information is fed back to the mother again. And that's all done in 15 minutes. And we've touched on just about every part of this town. And then the second act broadens it a little bit more. Now that we've seen how the news has affected the immediate family, it casts the net a little bit wider and shows you how it affects her friends and how it affects other members of the community. And it's not until the third act of the show, or over half an hour screen time has gone, before we come outside the Laura Palmer bubble and start to introduce some of the subplots. But even then, we don't do that a lot in the pilot. you get a little bit of who is this character? How do they relate to Laura Palmer? And a little hint at what their wider lives might be. But that's it. And then, like you say, they bring Cooper in, and that's nearly halfway through. And that's just kind of establishing what the show's going to be. Like, is this going to be a police procedural? And elements of it will be. But that's not introduced until nearly halfway through the pilot episode. You know, it's just incredibly well structured, and I suppose that speaks to David Lynch working in film largely as well. So he's used to longer form, used to shorter form storytelling. I suppose he's used to crafting a story that can be told within a certain amount of screen time.
Yeah, and I will just say, you said at the beginning of talking about all that we're not going to go into that much detail on all of them. I think what we're going to do mainly is, like, if you want an episode by episode, that exists out there. You can find like a dozen pods.
It's great,
like,
yeah.
without even trying. We're going to go, like, we're talking broad strokes. We're talking about the kind of general themes and kind of ideas of the show.
Yeah,
more than like an episode by episode
and
breakdown.
yeah,
And
if you want that, check out The Evolution of Horror presents The Detective and the Log Lady. I think that's what it's called. No. They're doing an episode by episode breakdown at the minute, and that they're doing some fantastic work over there. So check that one out if you want
awesome
more depth.
So let's go into a few of the kind of broader ideas which kind of happen. Mm-hmm. One thing I really love watching this, and part of this I knew, part of this kind of I looked up, and part of it kind of you informed me as we were going through. There were so many bits which just happen to happen. Mm-hmm. And Lynch includes them in there. And I think that's genius, especially with a show like this, because I don't like it when, like, I'm going to call out in the recent series of Doctor Who, there was a lot of things which just happened, and it's like, oh, well, that doesn't mean anything. Isn't that cool? It's like, no, that's very unsatisfying. But with this show, you kind of rely on having some red herrings and some kind of trails which turn out to be something other than you think it's going to be. Yeah. So when you've got things like the light is going because of a transformer, because of a bad transformer, I think it was Optimus Prime, because of a bad transformer in the lighting, and it turns out that was just something which actually happened on the day. Yeah. I love the fact that Lynch was like, no, keep it in there. That'd be cool. And like, there's even a few bits where I think kind of a line maybe someone doesn't say.
Yeah, there's a bit. I think it's the coroner or something like that. And Cooper says something like, oh, could you give us a minute? And the guy says, Jim. And he says, could you give us a minute? And the guy goes, and it's because he thought, because he'd not met Kyle MacLachlan before, and he thought Kyle, the actor, was asking him what his name was, and he answered Jim, which is the actor's name. And MacLachlan, rolled with it and said the line again to keep the scene going. And again, I think they said, "Oh, do we need another take?" And Lynch was like, "No, this sort of thing happens in real life. People mishear each other." And
but it's like when you watch it back, it just adds to the sort of surreal nature of it. Like, again, I'm not purposely just cherry picking from the pilot, but so much this informs the rest of it. But even the moment when a mysterious character we will later find out is called Bob appears in a reflection, that was just someone who was walking past, who was working on the set, who walked by, accidentally got caught in a mirror in the background in his shot, so they decided to keep it. Not only did they decide to keep it, but then Lynch made him Bob.
Yeah,
that was not how it was meant to go originally.
He was a stagehand and also an actor, but primarily he was a stagehand. And yeah, he's in the, for anyone who's not spotted, and it's easy not to spot it. In the very last scene, there is a mirror up on the wall, and you can see what we now know to be Bob's reflection in it. That one would have been taken out, I think, but I think Lynch already had the idea at that point. The story is that I think his name was Frank Silver, who plays Bob, and he accidentally got locked in the set of Laura's bedroom. and someone told this story to Lynch, and he was like, "Oh, right, interesting." And that made him come up with this idea of, right, I want to film Frank trapped behind the rails on a bed. And so he just filmed that just because this image appealed to him. And then when someone watched the dailies and told him about this reflection in mirror, he said, "Who was it who got caught in the thing?" So it's Frank, and he said, "Oh, perfect, that's it. Then I'm gonna have to do something with it." So that's the story. Whether it's apocryphal or not, I don't know, but it makes for a good story.
Yeah, and I just again, it just seems like the fact that some of this happened organically just adds so much
Mm,
texture. It makes it feel kind of like it's a living weird ass thing. Let's start talking through some of the characters, and kind of I think I'll lead into talking about kind of some of the plot. So
hmm
Coop, we said he appears kind of at least halfway through. I think it's like 3/4 of the way through the pilot. He turns up.
Yeah, I think I looked at the time reading when I was watching it on Paramount Plus, and it said 37 minutes.
Right.
So potentially the start of the second half of the episode, maybe just before.
Yeah. Okay. So about half, we'll say. I just love the fact that, and again, we instantly get this. First of all, you've got the device of having Diane, who is always leaving these like little reports to,
Mhm.
some which are very relevant and they do use it very cleverly to do some exposition. Most of the time, it's just some wonderful random bollocks, which I just love. It's like there's a bit of catch up of like what's happened previously, so you remind the audience. There's a bit of just like, can you send me some earplugs because something's happening, which is just again just some fun texture to add in there. But straight away when you first see him, you instantly get that thing of he's enthusiastic about everything. He kind of
Mm.
really is engaged. Like pie and coffee are just magical to him, and when he finds the right one, like I think he made the decision, which he later talks about kind of buying some property to move to Twin Peaks based on the pie and the coffee he has in the first episode.
Oh, I
I
think
think
so,
the
yeah.
rest is just bonus on top of it that
And he's got this sort of infectious need to involve other people in it. Like when I think when Albert is coming to town, he's like, "Albert, when you're coming down here, I'm gonna tell you've got to stay at this hotel because it's incredible, and you've got to eat this on your way down, and you got to stop there." And it's great. It's sort of he's and a lot of the characters actually are juxtaposed with the darkness of this world that they live in. Like
Mm.
on a surface level, you can sort of almost watch Twin Peaks as comfort viewing and get this sort of warm and fuzzy feeling being around these characters. But then every so often you're reminded that the catalyst for all of this is this absolutely horrific murder. And they don't shy away from the details of telling you what's happened to Laura and everything. And
No, not at all.
it is, and this is something that Lynch has examined throughout his work over and over, is that this idea of America and Americana sort of having this duality to it, that and yeah, he does this sort of very literally in Blue Velvet, where he presents this white picket fences version of Americana and then digs under it and finds this underbelly. And I think Twin Peaks is a step further in that on one level, yes, he's doing that, and we're getting this version of, cherry pie, Americana, and under that, there's the horrific murder. But Twin Peaks kind of takes it a step further and goes, well, actually, under that, there's actually this existential evil. And,
Yeah.
that theme is developed more as the series goes on, but it's there in these first episodes as well.
And I think the fact that Coop instantly, even though you've got Albert who comes in, and later on as the series, like the later series, the second series progresses, we see other elements from his previous life, if you will, coming into
Mm.
it. but straight away you just feel like he's of this place, like he's getting to know
Mhm.
it, but he just is one of them. Him and the sheriff just click straight away. The
Yeah.
fact that he like, I love the fact when he leaves the message for the sheriff about like the 101 things they've got to do. Then we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do. Sorry, I've got to go and use the loo. And then no, sorry, he isn't doing it on the radio. He's right in front of him, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
sorry, I've just got to go for a loo. Then I'll be right back with you. And the sheriff's just like, yep. it's just lovely, but it's, you feel like they've been having those conversations for years. It's just so effortless. And then when Albert comes in and starts acting like a dick, he's like, no, you will treat these people well.
Yeah.
Like, and again, he just sounds like one of them already, and he's been in town for 5 minutes, and it's just great. Added to which, it's the fact that, and this will get us into some of the other characters, it's the fact that Coop, as well as everyone else, no one questions any of the mysticism. You do, as you go on, find out that there is a kind of like an awareness in this town that there are some things beyond like the regular understanding of man. You find out also that Coop has done some research into different. He spent some time with who are the people with which he spent
Tibetan monks, he
Tibetan
says,
monks.
and he talks about the Dalai Lama a lot.
So you've got it like I kind of like got the feeling like it was almost like predestined that he would be the one who'd go to this town, like, you know, that he was the one who understood this stuff. I don't know if there was an element, and we might get into it when we see the film, because I think that goes into a bit of his backstory of where he's come from. And I think it might mention something about this, but I like to think that they kind of selected him as well because he is
Yeah,
someone who believes in the out there.
I think so. I think that's hinted at, and you know, we're not going to unlock the mystery of Twin Peaks with this podcast. I'm sorry if that's what you've
No. I'm just
if that what you've come for. I'm really sorry. There's no code to unlock it all. But yes, I think you certainly could read it that way. That Cooper has been brought to this place for a reason.
yeah.
Certainly.
But the thing is, it's the way they do that. Like most of the time, you'd establish that the town is aware of something kind of like greater than themselves, something kind of mystical. You'd establish that Coop is a believer in these Tibetan ways, which he's learned, and kind of that's got a mysticism to it. But instead, what they do is they just have like things like the log lady comes up to him and goes like, "My log's seen something. In time, my log will tell you it." And it's like they don't blink, they don't question it. And so
No,
far,
and
we've heard nothing about mystic kind of side to this. It's everything is just accepted, and I love it. It draws me in instantly.
and like the dialogue's just great. Like at the town meeting, you get where he says, "Who's the lady with the log?" Oh, we call her the log lady, and that's it. And just nothing else. And like you say, you know, my log will tell you when it's ready. And Cooper doesn't push it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there's even
arguably,
a
yeah,
moment where she goes like, "Well, is there anything you want to ask it now?" And they're quiet, and she goes, "Yeah, that's what I thought." And I like to think that's her saying, it's like, because I know this isn't the time when it tells you.
yeah, exactly. And it's almost like, yeah, I mean, you can read it two ways. You can read it as Cooper respects the fact that the log will give up its information at the right time, or he thinks, I'm not going to waste the man hours on pursuing a lead that is a log. You know,
I
so
don't believe that for one moment.
no, I
That
don't.
second theory, I
But,
don't.
but
I think everything bears out. He just completely is like, nope. She said the log will tell us in its own
yeah,
time. So I'm not going to ruin the timeline of this by asking early, because that could just ruin everything. You know, I
yeah.
think he believes in a continuum of events as well. I don't think it's just merely that he's respecting the log. He believes that this has to happen in this order.
Yeah, I can go with that. And the other thing about Twin Peaks is that, with one or two exceptions, each episode is meant to be a day, roughly. There's some that creep over into midnight or what have you. But the amount of incident that happens in this, it is farcical that all of this could happen in such a tight time period. So when you actually take a step back and think, right, so season one takes place over 8 days, and all the stuff that's happened, it's insane. But
Yeah.
I mean, even just the pilot's insane. Can we talk about Donna and James? Because
Please.
like this is where the soap opera side of it is at its most ludicrous, really. So if we follow the timeline, like the pilot episode finishes with them saying it was probably 24 hours ago that she was being murdered, and during this time, Laura's best friend and her secret boyfriend, not her official boyfriend. Her official boyfriend is actually having an affair with the
Everyone's
lady who
having a
works at the diner. But her secret boyfriend, Donna, her best friend, and James, her secret boyfriend, have realized that actually they're in love with each other. And they have this emotionally charged scene where you get this over the top music. And you could read it as soap opera melodrama, but I think Lynch has been more subtle than that. And I think you're supposed to find this scene hilarious where you've got them declaring their love for each other, and you get where they share this chaste kiss, and James says, "I'm sorry." And then he goes, "I changed my mind. I'm not sorry." And and I think that's supposed to be funny, but I could
Yeah.
absolutely see people watching it going, "This is awful. This dialogue's terrible." And it's like, yeah, but it's meant to be heightened, and I think you're meant to find it funny. But then, so that's day one, and then episode two, we've got Donna takes him home to meet the parents. So her best friend hasn't been dead 2 days, and she's going, "Oh, mum and dad, do you want to meet my new boyfriend? By the way, he used to go out with Laura as well. What, Laura who died 2 days ago?" And so on that level, it's farcical that these things are happening with the speed that they're happening, but
Can
it
I throw into that
works.
just the bit you said about like when she takes him home to meet the parents, and I love the fact the parents obviously really like him, really get on, but there's this lovely moment which again they never feel they are so trusting of the audience in this show. They never feel the need to over explain. Something's just there and you accept it and you get it. Like there's this bit where the parents are going to bed and they go, it's like, "So been lovely meeting you, good night son, like have a great one." He's like, "Yeah, thank you." It's like, "So I'll just be going off to bed." Like it's you can tell the dad's obviously
Yeah, yeah,
hanging
yeah.
around to stop them getting up to any hanky panky, but it's a lovely moment and they don't over explain. It's nice.
Yeah,
It's yeah, so characterful.
it
Then he
is.
eventually uneasily box off to bed.
I mean, in terms of characters, I think James is the character that I don't think works the way they wanted him to work. Like, I think he's meant to be this really cool biker bad boy,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't land that way at all. Like you've got in the first episode, you've got it. It's like he's got this little minion who comes to find Donna and goes, "Come on, get on my bike. I'll take you to James." Because he's such a bad boy that he has to hide up in the woods. And, no, I'm sorry. I don't know whether it's the actor that can't pull that off or whether the script doesn't do it. But,
Like he's doing the accounts for the biker gang. That's
yeah,
they
there, there,
or admin, low level
there's a
admin.
there's a dissonance between how cool we're being told he is and how cool he actually is.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just doesn't come across. But so he's a bit of a wet character. They don't land this cool bad boy thing, and even more so in season two. But that's one character I think that doesn't land the way he's intended to, whereas the rest of them are just fantastic, and there's so many different flavors of characters that they've got. Like you've got,
Oh, may I jump in with two?
yeah,
Like, there's a couple which I really want to get to, and I sort of like the fact as well that it feels like they weren't briefed to all necessarily be pulling in the same direction acting
mm,
style wise. So you feel like you get this kind of vast range of different, like almost like it shouldn't work. Almost like they should all be in a different show, but it just
Yeah.
clicks. And you've got Don S. Davis as
Mm.
the general. Sorry, I'm so shit with names. And his son,
Yeah, Major Briggs and Bobby Briggs.
Major Briggs and Bobby Briggs. And I love the fact the Major, basically, I grew up in a house, like, again, it's kind of like some parallels which I recognize. My dad was a conservative counsellor. Please don't stop subscribing. But but like he believed in small town stuff, and he kind of did some good stuff to our town. But we'll go over that. But I think that like brought me up with this kind of thing of like, especially as I got a bit older, and I kind of realized that I didn't agree with those politics. But I met these people, like all my mum, dad's friends, who were kind of like very respectful, very good people. I think they believed in good things, even if I don't agree with them politically. And I love the fact that the Major is he's clearly a right wing guy, but he's so empathetic and he talks in a way which is so relatable. And he's like, as your father, I want you to be able to express what you feel, my son. And he's talking all this way, which people on the right never talk. And it's sort of like, in a very weird way, made me think of that thing of like, I could relate to these people, even though I didn't agree on their politics, which is very rarely done these days. And it kind of like is this weird thing of like someone isn't necessarily what they appear to be, and like obviously that's a huge theme in Twin Peaks.
It's a very conservative with a small c depiction of a father-son relationship. It's almost like, well, obviously we're not going to talk about feelings properly and things like that. You know, I'm the major, you're the boy, and we're not going to do that.
Like,
oh, he does. Yeah.
Right wing at the same time. He's a very complex character.
Yeah, definitely. And we don't get a lot of Major Briggs in season 1, but Don S. Davis is just one of them great actors, and let's be honest, he usually plays a military man, but he's very good.
It's a very different character in Stargate SG-1.
Yeah,
and get a different rank and everything,
and completely different to Scully's dad in the X-Files. But he's very good at it, and Bobby's like your typical sort of bad boy character, whereas James is meant to be your cool bad boy. Bobby is just your dickhead bad boy, and particularly in these early episodes, he's just awful.
And it's a great example of them seemingly being acting in very different style. Like, so he's very, very soap opera, very large, very kind of over the top. Whereas Dennis Davis is so very measured, and everything he says in the same kind of monotone. And it's like until he just gets annoyed, then goes, "Look, you will respect me." Anyway, what I was saying was, and then he goes back to the same sort of monotone delivery, but it's so interesting. It's monotone, but it's quirky at the same time. It's interesting.
And Bobby even almost manages to elicit some sympathy from the audience, and you're almost rooting for him in his relationship with Shelley, because they go, yeah, okay, Bobby's a dickhead, but her husband is a monster. So, we can kind of root for Bobby in this one. I mean, the truth is Shelley should just ditch both of them. But if we have to choose, she would probably be better off with Bobby.
Oh my god, didn't we want to smack the abusive boyfriend? I mean, husband, isn't it?
Yeah, Leo.
I mean, Leo, as much as it's a great character, wonderfully acted, and it is so soap opera, he's like so cartoon evil, but he still manages to listen to this real hate of like, oh, you're fucking one more time and I'm gonna jump through this TV set. It's like he's
I
so
think
unlikable.
He's like, if we have out and out bad guys, Leo is possibly number one on your list of out and out bad guys. Maybe Ben Horn, but they're probably 1 and 2, and whichever way round you want to do it for different reasons. And because that's the other thing, like the murder mystery element of it, we need to have suspects. You need the audience to be able to suspect people. And I think in the early days, they very much wanted Leo to be in everyone's, like, at the top of everyone's list of suspects. And
Yeah.
obviously, you know, we're not going to talk about who the ultimate reveal of who the killer is at this stage, because we'll do that when we do the first half of season 2. But yeah, I feel like they lay it on thick. Like, well, look at Leo. He beats his wife up, and he's involved in drugs, and we know he knew Laura Palmer. I mean, everyone knew Laura Palmer, and we'll probably talk
Yeah,
about
well,
that more in
new Laura
season 2.
Palmer. The top. No,
In like how busy Laura Palmer was. She had about 25 different jobs. She had a drug habit. She had at least 3 boyfriends. You know,
yeah.
it's like that was a busy young lady.
And just very quickly, the wonderful conceit of having her playing her own cousin was just great.
Yes.
But we won't go into that one too much, just for time reasons. I did want to talk about the logging company and all the characters which surround
Yeah, oh yeah.
because that's a whole other rich vein. So you've got the brothers who are they called Ben and Jerry? Am I remembering correctly?
They are called Ben and Jerry, yeah.
Just nice. I love the fact they just throw in these weird Easter eggs of like the sheriff's named
Harry S. Truman.
Harris Truman, of course. I knew it was one of the presidents. Just lovely. Just no point in that, but just it's fun. And you've got Ben and Jerry there. You've got the kind of the family man who's obviously like he's having an affair. Everyone's having an affair in this town.
Yeah, everyone is.
He's a bit kind of like unpredictable. You know, that adds to the fact that he could be a suspect. And then you've got just the wacky brother who's always traveling around doing weird shit and like is like, right now I've got to steal with these people. Now I've got to steal with these people. And he's just so unpredictable.
There's this underlying thing in season 1 that we're trying to close this big business deal. And so it starts with the Norwegians in the first episode. And then the Norwegians leave, which is a big scene in the first episode. And we finish with Icelanders in the final episode of the season. So they're definitely wanting to do a deal with someone Nordic. Seems to be the goal that they have.
And it's so much fun. And like straight away you've got like a scene where the I think it's in the second episode where the kind of more straight-laced of the brothers is sat there having dinner with his family. It's just all very staid there in the conversation. And the other brother comes in just like a whirlwind, and he's suddenly got this, is it brie sandwich? Like
yeah, it's a brie sandwich. Yeah, I mean, that's the weirdness that perhaps people wouldn't necessarily pick up on, but this is David Lynch playing with the form of television that so you have the opening credits, and opening credits were a lot longer in them days than they are now, unless you're on HBO. That plays out, but then you have the list of all your guest characters and your director and blah, 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 blah. And that takes quite a while for all of that to play out on TV, and it usually plays out over whatever's going on in the first scene. But David Lynch just decides in this one, I'm just going to have a family sat there eating quietly. And, you know, to open a TV show with that much quiet, it was just, pardon the pun, but it's quietly very subversive what he's doing. And then, like you say, it just explodes because he comes in and goes, oh, I've got these sandwiches. And then you just have another several minutes of the brothers eating these sandwiches sort of near orgasmically. And it's just bizarre.
The brother who generally is the more staid and quiet one, is that Ben or Jerry?
That's Ben.
Ben. So you've got Ben there who kind of like, for most of it, is quite a serious character. He's always trying to like steady the ship and get everything doing. But I kind of like the fact that whenever his brother appears, he acts more wacky and silly. Like he kind of like when he's eating the sandwich, like, oh, this is the most amazing thing ever. Oh, I'm going family in the middle of a family dinner. And he just becomes that around his brother. But we all it does represent something of like the way we are all different people around our family, or you know, a lot of us kind of can end up being different people and almost regressing around our families. And I think in a very wacky way it speaks to that real experience.
It's sort of the microcosm of the broader thing we were talking about with Lynch digging into what lies under America. It's kind of what lies under this person. And and it almost is with Ben Horn. That side doesn't come out until Jerry's introduced, and obviously we find out that Ben, as well as owning the hotel that he's trying to sell to someone Nordic, also owns a brothel in Canada. And they and it's called One Eye Jacks, and you have like Jerry sort of goes, and that's how Ben sort of brings Jerry round. He's like, "Oh, Jerry's having a bit of a bad day. Hey, you want to go to One Eye Jacks?" And it's just, yeah, it's crazy.
And at the logging company, you've got the widow of the original owner,
Yes,
who's
so there's Josie Packard
and
is
she,
the widow. Yeah,
and it's her deceased husband's sister who's like working against her.
yeah,
So,
Catherine.
and I think there's so much which, again, like it's kind of in the weird and wonderful. There's so much both personal relatable stuff and relatable stuff to the time. So at the time, there was a lot of kind of like with business going global, which was just starting in the 90s. You did have companies from overseas investing and kind of buying up American companies, making them bigger. You did have the thing of like the bride who've come in from another land who's kind of like taken over. And it's like there's a lot of these kind of things which I think we're sort of in the zeitgeist, and part of it is sitcom, like sitcom soap opera plots as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
And it just becomes this thing all of its own with all these kind of weird mixes in it. It's just fascinating.
yeah. It's when you start to like tug at the threads. So we've got Ben Horn, who owns various businesses. He's having an affair with Catherine Martell, who is, like you said, her brother, who is now deceased, left the sawmill to Josie Packard, who's dating the sheriff. But that's actually one of the few two consenting adults who are not otherwise attached dating each other. But that's about the only one. And then
Well, it's Billy and his girlfriend as well. I think that's about the only other one.
Who?
So Billy, the young guy at the station.
Young guy at the station.
With the
Andy,
sorry.
Andy, yes. There's Andy and Lucy. You're right. Yeah. They're allowed. they're allowed to be a couple.
And I love, like, certainly at the end of the first series, she's mad at him all throughout it. Then
Yeah.
tells him she's pregnant, and he walks off. And you never get the backstory thus far. I think it is explored in season 2, but why she's mad at him, like, unless it's the pregnancy somehow.
That comes in season 2, so yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah,
like, you never know when a season ends if you're going to get another season. And
that was the big thing about the finale episode, is that they didn't know if they were guaranteed a pickup for season 2 or not. So they tried to write.
Sorry, I want to do that right at the end, but just very quickly, I want to just quickly jump on to Laura's parents, because we haven't mentioned them so far.
Yeah,
the mum, who wonderfully is the stereotype of an hysterical woman in grief, and she's like, again, that's so soap opera to do that. And she just, like, there is, I think there's nary a scene where she doesn't scream her lungs out. And I'm usually watching this after I've got back from rehearsals for the play, so I'm putting TV. So it's like, turn it down, I don't want to wake up the house.
That's the thing, though. I think on one level, you could say it is almost soap opera like, but I think it's also a very sort of stark depiction of abject grief, which we don't often see in any media, really, because it presenting actual grief the way it's felt, it makes you uncomfortable. We don't like to see that in our fiction, because it is something that is very personal and is huge and is traumatic and is difficult to deal with. And I think presenting that on screen in a real way is very, very uncomfortable. And I do think they get close to that with this character, but it is very limited. Like, we don't see a lot of her. And I think partially for that reason.
Yeah, I think there is something very primal. You're so right. I did notice the duality of like, yeah, part of it is very soap opera to go that large, but also like this is sort of like grief untamed with both the parents. So you've got the mum who just, as I say, screams in pretty much
Hmm.
every scene, and her grief is so raw. And so is it from the father, who I remember from this show called Reaper, which was, I think it did 2
Yes,
seasons.
yes,
Really great. He played the devil in that, and
yeah.
he was so delicious in that, and he's just
He's
such
a
a
great
wonderful actor.
actor.
Oh, he's got so much chops, as they say in the business. And just his depiction of just a guy who's just falling apart and just
Yeah,
has nothing left in the tank is just
and
great as well.
whereas the way they play it with him leans into farce at times. Like there's the sequence where there's like a dinner dance, I think, with the Icelanders,
Yes.
and he starts having a bit of a kind of a traumatic breakdown, and he starts like grasping his head, and then I think it's Catherine Martell sees it,
Yeah.
and to cover for it, she pretends to doing a dance, and so you end up with this whole room all doing this silly dance with the heads.
Crippling
And
the head.
and in the funeral scene, he has this bit where he jumps on the coffin, and the mechanism gets stuck, and it keeps going up and down and up. And it's on one level, it's horrifying because it's like that's the last place and time you would want something to go wrong in that way, but it's also funny.
I,
You
I
know,
I think it sort of relies on that, though. I think
yeah,
that's what it's kind of this sort of like the whole show encapsulating one thing. It's making you feel such conflicting things at the same time because of his amazing acting. And the same thing with the mum. Like it is so grounded on one hand. Like they're definitely drilling into some real powerful acting,
yeah,
but in the most ridiculous circumstance or the such heightened circumstances, it also seems a bit funny at the same time.
it is.
And I
Yeah,
love it. It challenges you what you're trying to feel at this moment, and you're
it
feeling all these things as the answer.
it does, and it also breaks the tension, like allowing you to laugh
Yeah,
breaks this tension that you're feeling because it is uncomfortable to be exposed to this sort of thing and this level of darkness, really. And I imagine probably we'll talk about the actual sort of ins and outs of the murder and everything when
yeah.
it's all revealed in season 2. But it is like a stark contrast every time they remind us of what actually happened to Laura. And I think you do need to pepper in these moments of humour to offset that.
Well, let's take it home though. I jumped in before because I wanted to. I
Mm.
thought this was a natural way to end the episode, but talk to us a bit about the kind of like the multiple things they do at the end to have us like coming back and getting us renewed for a season 2.
Well, they basically wanted to have a cliffhanger for every single character. They wanted every character to be in some degree of peril.
Yeah.
So very early in the episode, you have Dr. Jacoby gets hit over the head by an unknown assailant.
Oh, we didn't even get into Jacoby. We'll get into him next time.
We will. And so I think that's the first bit. Then you've got Bobby plants drugs in James's bike. To be honest, don't care. Don't care. Hope he gets arrested and held out of state somewhere. So that you have that. You have Shelley gets tied up by her husband Leo in the sawmill, which is then burnt down.
Oh, and
And
and the redheaded lady who's having an affair with Ben,
Catherine,
Catherine, isn't it her who comes in and goes like, I can't understand what you're saying. You've got some rope in your mouth.
yeah,
You're gagged. It's like just
it's great.
It's great.
And yes, so there's Catherine and Shelley are caught in the exploding sawmill. Josie's disappeared. Leo gets shot. Donna and think, yeah. Coop gets shot right at the end. That's the final cliffhanger. Is Coop opens his door. There's a mysterious shooter, and that's absolute classic from the soap operas. Who shot Jr. You know.
Yes, but like at the time, okay, with soap operas, obviously from time immemorial, you always had a like continuation to the next episode. But generally, in more episodic TV, like Dallas, I know was a soap opera, but it was done by season. It wasn't just
Yeah,
an
it was.
ongoing thing. In seasons of TV, I believe it was Dallas who had the first real cliffhanger ending in a kind of ongoing.
Yeah,
series.
they were one of the first ones to do a big end of season cliffhanger. Yeah.
So by this stage, it was still a relatively new idea. So to do one where it's like everyone gets a cliffhanger,
Yeah,
was certainly kind of a groundbreaking sort of format point.
it was sort of daring the network to cancel them, really. Like, we're going to leave everything up in the air. And on top of all of this, we've not told you who killed Laura Palmer, which is the big hook of the entire show. So, yeah, there was plenty to come back for.
Well, my friend, we have run out of time, but this has been... I'm kind of glad we did it now, because it's like, I love the energy of trying to go through all this weird and wonderful. And I don't think there's a way of, in a linear way, telling the story of Twin Peaks unless you are going by episode. But even then...
you'd struggle.
So this has been great fun. Do you want to leave them on any kind of cliffhanger? What can we leave them with?
Well, I don't know. We will be back next time, and we will find out who killed Laura Palmer.
There you go. There's the cliffhanger. We're just going to nick it from the show.
Yeah.
Jim, anything you want to plug?
Well, as you mentioned at the start, we do the Retrek podcast, and we're going out Monday this week. And it's Chakotay week, which anyone who listens to us will know we're looking forward to.
A Retrek favorite for sure. I have been Special Agent Squee, and with me on the case has been
Deputy Jim. Oh, I should have done the Bookhouse Boys symbol.
Oh yeah. So like, God, I've forgotten how I end this thing. It's been a little while. Sorry. And a world where you can be truly anything, please. And I haven't got the credits ready. That was a bit shit of me. Sorry. In a world where you can be truly anything, please stay tuned to your dreams. And just before we go, I clicked on the wrong video. That's an old one. Please do not stay tuned to a radio show because I don't have one anymore. But see you next time.